Good evening, everyone. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, Middletown Patch, and the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T minor administrative offices and each elementary, middle, and secondary school in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti?
Here.
Mrs. Farley?
Here.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Here.
Mr. Heffernan?
Here.
Mrs. Muniz?
Here.
Mr. Tulk?
Here.
Mrs. Wright? Mrs. Tobacco?
Here.
Mr. Capone?
Here. I now need a resolution for executive session to speak about legal matters and contract negotiations.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? See you in a little while. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, and the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T. Meyer administrative offices in each elementary, middle, and secondary school in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti?
Here.
Mrs. Farley?
Here.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Here.
Mr. Heffernan?
Here.
Mrs. Benoist?
Here.
Mr. Toth?
Here.
Mrs. Wright? Mrs. Tobacco?
Here.
Mr. Capone?
Here. We're now going to stand for the pledge with a moment of silence. With sadness, we share that Jacqueline Hickey passed away on February 24th. Mrs. Hickey served the district as a secretary at Thompson Middle School for 25 years and retired in 2010. We extend our deepest condolences to the Hickey family. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're now going to turn to Mrs. Zari for the 23-24 tentative budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Capone.
Can we give these 2 copies to the?
Sure, that's fine, yes.
I'll stay with you.
Well, thank you very much. As we've been discussing at previous meetings, and we've been doing a lot of work in our board committees as far as putting together next year's tentative budget, we are here tonight to give an overview of that. So Chris, if you want to go to the first slide. Those of you who've seen budget presentations in the past, this looks familiar. The Department of Ed evaluates our budget based upon the areas that are listed up here. This comes directly from the Department of Ed budget guidelines. As we prepare our budget, we have to make sure that we are addressing all of these areas. We prepare narratives that go with the budget, and we submit those to the Department of Ed. So as we look at the budget, we have to make sure that all of these areas are included and explained to the Department of Ed what we are doing in these areas. So our budget does incorporate addressing all of these areas and maintaining the standards and curriculum that are required. So tentative budget is exactly that. It's a tentative budget. The budget that the board is going to be considering and voting on this evening is our tentative budget proposal that is put together based upon the information we have at this time. We submit this to the Department of Ed, the county office. They review it. If they approve it, then the board can move forward with that budget, and they can either make additional changes or adopt it as is. And then a public hearing is held on the budget at the end of April. So as an administrative team, we are working on a budget that it's now March of 2023. This budget will have to take us through to June of 24. So it's a long period of time. We can only use the information we have to plan. I will say that one area that we are still looking at in detail is staffing. That's something that changes a lot over the next several months. We don't know all of our enrollments yet. We don't know what all of the needs are. We have a projection of staffing based upon the information we have now, but we won't stop looking at it at this point. It will be a continual process until the schedules are done and we open up school in September. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So this slide presents our proposed budgeted revenue. If you let your eye go down to the bottom, this slide is made up of our operating revenue. These are the revenues that would be recurring each year to support our budget. The increase in our operating revenue for this year is 1.76%. That is largely driven by the item at the top, which is the biggest supporter of our budget, our tax levy. The tax levy is being presented at an increase of 2%. The state does allow districts to increase their tax levy up to 2% without getting voter approval. There are some adjustments to that which can come into play. We will talk about that in a little bit, but 2% is the cap on the levy increase, generally speaking. Our state aid for this year is being decreased by $329,000. That's less than what we had projected. We had projected a little over a $600,000 increase, but thankfully it came in less than that. But we are still riding out the effects of the S2 legislation that is reallocating state aid with all the districts in the state. We have a little bit more to go on that, but we are only losing about $329,000 for this year. Each year we project extraordinary aid. We do estimate that even though we don't know what it's going to be. We're not even told what this year's extraordinary aid is going to be until after the close of our fiscal year, so we'll find that out in July. But we use an estimate based upon past reimbursements, and we project that in the budget. We have other sources of revenue, such as interest, tuition from preschool students and other students who attend some of our programs here in the district. Our enterprise activities are primarily the money that we have with our agreement with the YMCA. They run our before and after care, and they provide us with revenue for using our facilities to provide that program. We also have some refunds of prior year expenses. One of the more notable ones is we've been submitting, we have 2 large submissions into FEMA, believe it or not, still for COVID expenses. It takes a long time to work that through. We did just get a reimbursement back of about $230,000 for the current year, and we are expecting another 300 plus for next year. It's a lot of work and a lot of hoops to go through, but if you can get it through, there is money to be had there. We do participate in the Special Education Medicaid Initiative as required by the state unless you have a waiver. The state tells you what to project as revenue for that, so that's $243,000. I do want to emphasize that that does depend upon us getting permissions from parents to submit for the reimbursements, and then we do all the paperwork to submit for reimbursements. Then that money flows through the state. The state does take 2/3 of the reimbursement that's generated, but the district does get 1/3. And it does help to offset some of the additional services that we provide our special education students within the school setting, things that would qualify for Medicaid. So it does help offset that. Without that offset, then that just comes out of our budget. We do participate and put together transportation jointures with other districts to save money on routes that go out of district for various schools. We work with neighboring districts, and we will host the route, and then we bill them their share, which offsets our expense and then also saves them money, because we would only do this if we can do it cheaper than getting it from a private contractor or another source. So we do anticipate that revenue as well. So our subtotal for our operating revenue is almost $174 million, about a $3 million increase over last year. Go to the next slide. So bringing forth our operating revenue total, we are also utilizing some non-recurring revenue to support our operating expenses for this budget. We are using fund balance. We have the remainder of, for a few years, the fund balance the state had you save at the end of the year was up to 4% because of the savings that districts were realizing from the pandemic because operations weren't normal. So we are using the remainder of that fund balance because we have to bring it down to 2% by the end of this year. And then we are also utilizing a small amount of capital reserve that we are able to replenish for this year to fund the budget. So adding those revenues in, that brings our total revenue for next year to $181 million, or an increase of 2.73%. You go to the next slide. This is an overview of our proposed budgeted expenses broken down into the categories that we report to the state on. We have our regular programs instruction. Those are our school budgets and other salaries and supplies that are related to regular program instruction. You can see that has not had a significant change for this year, just a small decrease of 0.15%. We have special education instruction. Those expenses include the self-contained classes and other costs that are related to our special education instruction, but not tuition. We also have increase in our co-curricular athletics and after-school and summer programs of about 4.18%. That's being generated by, there's an additional couple of activity stipends that we are considering for next year, clubs. And there are also some programs that we were previously funding with ESSER funds and other COVID funds out of our after-school and summer programs, which we are now funding back into our regular budget for this year. Our total tuition, that is actually going up significantly, 14%. We do have included in that number for next year anticipated placements of students that we feel are going to be placed out of district. And then there's also increases in the tuition amounts just for the continuing students. Private schools are allowed to go to the state, and if they can justify why they have to raise their tuition over 2 or 3%, they can apply to the state and get permission to that. I just received a letter today from a school that's going up 10% for next year. They went to the state and got that approved. So it's not just a matter of number of placements, but it's also that just the tuition costs are rising. We also pay that, this is not just special education tuition either, we also do pay tuition to the county vocational schools, and that's included in this area as well. And that would be our shared time programs and the academy programs, such as MAST and communications and Allied, all of those schools are included here as well. We have our attendance health related services and guidance area, which is mostly driven by salaries, and that's going up a little over 2%. We also have our other student support services, which would be in our CST area. Those are a lot of the related services that we provide for special education students. That's remaining relatively stable at 1.2%. We also have our improvement of instruction, staff training, and media services. That is going up 1.5%. We do have things like professional development, but we also have salaries in there as well. So that's going up a smaller amount. You want to go to the next slide. We have our school district central and IT administrative costs. Those are primarily salaries, but other administrative costs for running the district, either at the school level, the district level, central office, and all of our IT department is in this area as well. And that's actually going down 2.1% because of some reductions in some of our cost estimates for this year. Our operation and maintenance of plant, this also includes security. So the big difference here is in last year's budget, we did not budget for the Class 3 officers that we brought in. This year's budget does include the continuation of that, but that is driving a lot of the increase there. There's also an increase projected in our property and casualty insurance that is included in here as well. But all of those items are in that category. Our student transportation services is going up 2.7%. The CPI on contracts that we are renewing for transportation that we want to renew is 5.86%. This percentage is lower. We do continually look to make our routes more efficient. If there's routes that we can eliminate based on enrollments not being there and being able to consolidate, we do that. So that we're hoping to hold that to less than what the CPI percentage is. Employee benefits, the biggest driver here is our health benefits. As all of you are probably aware, we did shift to a self-insured platform last year. This current year is our first full year on that platform or that program. We have been within the budget and controlling costs with that. For next year, we do have a estimated increase because of claims increase of around 10%. This is actually favorable compared to what that I'm hearing a lot of other districts are getting, and it's certainly favorable compared to districts that are in the state health benefits plan, where they had a 15.1% increase being generated by that plan. So a large amount of that increase is being driven there. Again, it's the estimate that we get from the broker. That's what we have to rely on for budgetary purposes. That, could be more, could be less, but we have to go with the information that we're given and make the estimate. Our capital outlay, as you can see, we do not have as much budgeted here as last year. It's $571,000. That's equipment and any projects that we're doing that would be over the $2,000 capital limit. It's a decrease of 76%. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about that on next, the future slide. We also do have to pay charter schools. That's $75,000. The state tells us who's enrolled in the charter schools. We have 3 students at this point who are enrolled in charter schools that we are required to pay the tuition for. We also do have to allow for interest that's being earned on our capital maintenance reserve, and so that brings us to our total budget of $181 million, or a 2.73% increase over last year. Go next slide. This slide demonstrates our tax levy increases from 2011-12 to the proposed increase for next year of 2%. And the reason we use the 2011-12 year is because that's the first year that the tax levies were capped at 2%. So you can see our trend has been pretty stable as far as being, at 2% or below. We've had a couple of spikes where the district has used some of the bank tax levy cap to support the budget. But overall, the tax levy increase average since the implementation of the 2% cap is 1.89%. So we still are below the 2% cap as far as an average goes. You want to go to the next slide? So we talked before a little bit about exceptions to the 2% tax levy cap. The state budget does allow for exceeding 2% in certain cases. If you raised your tax levy less than 2% in a previous year, the difference between what you raised it, the percentage that you raised it, and the 2% becomes what they call bank tax levy cap for 3 years, and it's available to the district to use in a future budget if needed. So there's that piece, and then the state also does allow adjustments for certain things, such as increased enrollment, healthcare costs, but that's tagged to the state health benefits plan, which is actually in play this year. Because the state health benefits plan went up 15.1%, it is generating adjustments on school budgets that will allow for an excess of 2% to cover the increase in healthcare costs, again, indexed to the state health benefits plan. We are not utilizing that additional adjustment for this year, but it does generate future banked tax levy cap that would be available to the district for the next 3 years of about $2.1 million. So our additional tax levy that is available for future budgets at this point is almost $2.9 million. We are not utilizing it in next year's budget, but this will carry forward. In addition to the increase that we have from the health benefits, we have $714,000 that was from a previous below 2% increase, and that will expire next year. Our state aid, you can see the trend here. We had a large cut for the 2010-2011 year. That is when the state aid for Middletown was reduced from almost $21 million in 2009-10 down to $13,741,000 for the 10-11 year. Just for a point of reference, you can see the line going up. We did receive some subsequent increases in state aid, but with the implementation of S2 in the 17-18 year, our state aid now has been on the decrease for the past several years. At this point, we are down to $13,200,485. So we are below what we were at 2010-11 when that initial large cut was made. So to be getting that getting less than what we got back in 2010-11 in the current times of 23-24, and the amount of value that those dollars have lost with inflation and cost increases, that has really been something we've had to manage with our budget process. Go to the next slide. This is a recap of our reserves. We have a capital and a maintenance reserve that we maintain. Our capital reserve, we took $2.2 million out of it for the current year budget, and that decreased our reserve. And then we are looking to generate $154,000 with our current year operations to deposit back into capital reserve so that we can use it for next year's budget, which would leave us with our remaining balance of $4,853. So you can see that we really don't have any reserves built up there. Our maintenance reserve, we have $569,000. We are not projecting any activity in that. We're not using any of that to support next year's budget. We didn't use any of it to support the current budget. We will leave that there for the district to have in case there's a need for it for a maintenance item that wasn't budgeted and we need support from additional funds to cover. We have drawn on that from time to time over the past decade or so. You go to the next slide. This details the proposed amount of capital outlay that we have for 23-24. Like I said, it involves equipment and projects. We have some allocations for health equipment, school level equipment, special education equipment that may not be all specifically identified, but we know during the course of the year that between IEPs and other needs that arise that we do end up spending a certain amount on purchasing equipment for student use during the year. We have an allocation here for replacement of facilities equipment. That would include trucks and other vehicles and other equipment that we have in the facilities department. We've also budgeted for the matching portion of the COPS grant that we received last year that we will be working on getting that project started in the upcoming year. That grant was for access control systems throughout the district. We received a grant of $491,000, and our matching portion, which would be 25% of the whole project, is $163,000. We also have a Harmony Playground project that we submitted a DCA grant for earlier this year. We had requested a $100,000 grant. We have not heard back on that, but to do the entire project, we are budgeting an additional $40,000 to complete that playground. But that will be contingent upon whether we are awarded the DCA grant from the state, and I'm not sure when we'll find out about that. We're hoping soon. We also budgeted 60% share of some anticipated ROD grant projects. The state currently has ROD grants available for districts. They will pay 60% of the estimated cost of a project. I'm sorry, they will pay 40%. The district has to pay 60%. We have some smaller projects that we have lined up to do next year if we receive the ROD grant funding. Some specifics would be fire alarm replacements in certain buildings. We are looking at some door replacements at Bayview because their doors are not closing as well as they should, and a few other things. But again, that will be contingent upon whether we are awarded the ROD grants. If not, then we'll have to figure, what we can allocate the money that we budgeted for and what projects we can cover. We also always list here the SDA debt assessment of $27,000 because the state, even though they give you the state aid, they charge you back money to offset interest and costs on the debt that they issue to support your debt service levy or your debt service aid. So that's $27,000 that the state takes back out of your state aid every year, basically. So we have to list that separately, and we just want everybody to be aware of that. You can go to the next slide. So separate from our operating budget, we have our debt service budget. Our debt service tax levy is something that the community commits to when a referendum is passed. So for this year, our total debt service budget is $6,483,000. Is comprised of principal payments on our 3 outstanding bond issues and interest on those payments. We listed the maturities here. As you can see, we have a few, 2 of our bond issues will be dropping off in the next few years. We have the 2014 bond issue is what we issued with that referendum, and that was to support the last round of ROD grants that we had. So that will mature in 2033. By the end of the next budget year, our total outstanding bonds will be $26,770,000. And just to put that in perspective, when we calculate our legal debt limit based upon what debt we have outstanding and the district's budget and what we could actually issue, our legal debt limit is $469 million. So as you can see, we are nowhere near that amount, but we would have a lot of debt capacity if the district chose to use it. If you want to go to the next slide. So this slide captures what the impact of the proposed budget would be on an average assessed value home of $592,700. Last year's value was $530,200. You can see there's been an increase there based upon an increase in the valuations. So the operating tax impact for next year, looking at what we have for 22, 23, and what is proposed, would represent an increase in the impact or the amount of the tax levy that's allocated to the operating budget of $130 on an annual basis, which would equate to $10.84 monthly. Our debt service tax impact, last year we were at $203.62, this year $205.33. So the annual increase in that would be $1.70 or 14 cents a month. So overall, our impact on an average assessed value home, the increase would be $131.82 or $10.98 a month. Our tax rate is actually lower this year because of the increase in the assessed values of all the properties in town, not just residential, but also the commercial properties. We do participate in several shared services with the township, also at the state level, the county level. We participate in a variety of purchasing cooperatives where we are able to utilize bids that are put out that many districts and even municipalities and counties participate in. We do also participate in a joint insurance fund for our liability insurance with other school districts. We also, as we mentioned, do the jointure routes with transportation, which would be a shared service, but we also participate in the Monmouth Ocean and Service Commission's routes, which they also pool districts together. And we still continue to utilize space at the Middletown Arts Center at no cost for our performing arts program, which is a benefit. You can go to the next slide. So our budget timeline. Tonight we have the board voting on our tentative budget. If the budget is approved, we will submit it to the county office for review. That has to be done by March 20th by statute. After we receive that review back and approval from the county office, we are given the approval to advertise the budget. So that gets advertised in the newspaper, our official newspapers, Asbury Park Press. We then are able to schedule our public hearing and adoption of the final budget, which we have slated to coincide with our April 25th voting meeting because that falls within the statutory dates for adopting our final budget. And that is the overview.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. Does anybody have any questions? Name?
Excellent.
Yeah.
You sent through us, right?
Yep.
Thank you. This is just kind of a general question about how the process works. So if the reduction in state aid is, what is that, 330,000 less than we got last year, right?
We're receiving 330,000 less than last year, yes.
Right. What else accounts for the need for a full, like, 3.05 million in tax revenue? Is it just all like inflationary factors, or, because there's some things that went down, right? The staffing, or the administrative staffing cost issue.
Well, this budget, when we project our budget for next year, we have to take into account, the majority of our budget is salaries. That is the biggest driver of our budget. So as we've agreed to increases with the bargaining units, we have to budget for that. So being that the average of those increases are 3% or more, taking that on our amount of salaries, that alone, would generate an increase that would be almost equivalent to what you're increasing your tax levy would be. Now, we do look at staffing every year, and we consider if there's positions that we don't need based on enrollments being less or things of that nature. We can take those offline through attrition. If we have retirements, then we may not need to replace. But we also have this year some positions that we were funding through ESSER funds that we're looking at now without ESSER funds, whether those need to continue. Again, the health benefits is a large driver of our budget, and a 10% increase on, a line item that's, $25 million, that will generate an increase as well. We do get employee contributions against that, but, our costs will go up a significant amount, based on that, and that's, again, not even as high as what we've seen in some other districts. There's been inflationary costs, and, our property and casualty, as I mentioned, is scheduled to go up, but by far the biggest drivers of our budget are the salaries and the benefits.
The property and casualty increase, is that something we renew every year with that carrier?
Well, we participate right now in the diploma JIF. When you participate in a JIF, you commit for 3 years. We are actually at the end of our 3-year cycle, so we're in the process of going out for a full marketing on that. So we'll be looking at not only the JIF, but also other options. Previously, we've done the school board's insurance. We look at other options as well. So our broker right now is working on putting all that together, but we won't know what that renewal, either a renewal for the JIF or a new carrier, we won't really have that final information until probably, the end of May, early June. So we have to budget for what we're being told to expect as an increase. I know cyber liability has gone up, and just the regular property casualty has gone up a lot because of all the losses that have been experienced nationwide. They just come back on everybody with the hurricanes and the fires and everything else.
So who gives that estimate that it's going to be higher no matter who goes? Is that our current carrier?
Our broker.
Oh.
Our broker who works to secure coverage for us, right? Yeah.
Okay.
With our health insurance, it's based upon what our claims trend has been. Because we've gone away from securing coverage from an insurance company to funding our own claims. So we monitor what our activity has been, and costs on that have gone up too.
Anything else, guys?
No, I think that's it, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else has questions? Okay. We're now going to open the microphone up for public comment on agenda items only. If you have anything to speak, now just come to the microphone, state your name and address the record.
Hi there, my name is Chris Patton, and I live at 41 Powell Avenue in Atlantic. So I have a question. I understand that the state aid went down, and my understanding is that that's related to enrollment. Is that true?
It's related to a variety of factors. Enrollment is one of the factors, but as I mentioned in the presentation, but if you haven't heard in previous presentations, about 6 years ago now, the state passed legislation, and they call it S2, that was the name of the bill, that was reallocating state aid between districts. Some districts received more aid, and some districts were getting reduced aid, and they based that on what they felt your funding was at that time back in 2017, whether you were getting a higher amount of aid than you should or a lower amount of aid than you should. So they determined at that time that Middletown was overfunded and they've been reducing our state aid over the past 6 years, and we'll have one more year left on that. So it can be additionally affected by enrollment. Our enrollment has been trending down. The primary driver of the reductions was this S2 legislation and the percentages that were outlined in that law to reduce our state aid.
What percentage has our enrollment decreased year over year?
Our enrollment has gone down, I think I have that in here, but it's been about 11 or 12% over the past, say, 10 years or so. It's been continuing to tick down, not at a steep rate, but a little bit every year. If you want to take a look, there was more detailed information on that. We had a presentation in January where we had all the enrollments laid out for the past several years and what the decreases have been. So if you look on our website for the January board meeting, that presentation had a lot of that background information.
Okay. Can I keep asking my questions?
Sure.
Okay, we'll just go through it. Okay, so I see instruction costs are going down, and I know Gary asked some questions on that, but is that reduction due to this student enrollment decrease?
So sometimes we are able to reduce classes if the enrollment of the school has dropped and we don't need as many classes as we did the year before. We still don't have all those final numbers because we don't have all the enrollments for next year. We don't have all the schedules for next year, but we are working on that. But if that does happen and the enrollment fluctuates, we can, or sometimes it won't even be a reduction, but it might be a reallocation. The school might need an additional teacher, another school might need one teacher less. We do take a look at that every year and realign our staff where it needs to be.
Okay, because I mean, what I've heard is that the costs per teacher are going up because I guess with the union, right, you're paying them increased costs, but this cost is going down, which means that it seems like a pretty significant reduction.
We also have realized, and then also what tends to happen is attrition or retirements. So we do have a continuing cycle of teachers who have been with us for many years. If they then retire and we hire new staff and they come in at a lower level, we can realize some savings with that as well.
Okay.
So,
As a parent, I think I'm speaking for all parents, it would just be good to know how that impacts the classrooms. So are my kids going to go from a class size of 20 to a class size of closer to 30? I mean, that's a big impact. Are there specials going to be impacted?
I mean, I don't know, Mrs. Walker, if you want to talk about that, but right now we've been looking at all the enrollments and it's not any consolidations that we might make. It's not raising class sizes to, above what our standards would be. And the class sizes have been generally lower than they've been in the past few
We
years.
do set a limit, like the elementary class sizes are 25. So you will have, even within the same school, 2 classes of 25, say in second grade, but in 5th grade, you might have 2 classes of 20, just because of the numbers. But once we go over that 25 limit, say there's 2 classes in the school and there's 51 students, then we would either add another teacher, or if it was a new student coming in, we might assign them to a different school that has lower enrollment. So that's how, but we don't go over that 25 limit. We're not planning to.
So I know these budget conversations are tough. I guess like tangible examples of how this would impact the schools and our students would be helpful. Okay, so my next question, the capital outlay projects, and I apologize, this is my first meeting, so you may have covered this a million times.
No,
but
that's-
there are schools, my kids go to English, but they play sports at Bayview. That there are areas of that school ground that I do not let my children near because it's a hazard. So what is the priority for upgrading the school facilities?
Well, as you can see by looking at our reserves, we really don't have a lot available funds in capital reserve right now. So we are doing our best to maintain what we have. There are no large projects budgeted for next year, but referring specifically to something like a field at Bayview, we do, through our maintenance and facilities budget, we will do what we can to maintain the fields, but there isn't any large improvement project budgeted for next year for that. But we also have to take into account what is the priority for our program. I mean, at the elementary schools, we use our fields, it's really for gym or recess. They also get a lot of other community use, and so that's always the balance, that those fields do get used by a lot of other groups, and then, we have to try to work with the township to maintain them.
So I was referring specifically to a brick wall that has been falling down, that if the kids are slides to on, and it's been that way for a few years, so.
I mean, I can make a note that I haven't had anyone bring that to me specifically.
Okay. I think
Where's it?
so in Bayview, behind the school, there's a soccer field, and the cement dips down, and there's a brick wall that's half of the bricks are missing, and the kids just love to walk on it like a balance beam, and all three of my children have gotten hurt on it.
Is it one of the,
Is it a backstop? Is it a backstop or something?
No, it's connected to the building. It comes out of the building. I can take a picture of it and email it to you.
We can go take a picture.
We'll look at it. We can look at it.
Nobody
But if you ever have, I mean, well, I guess that isn't your home school, but,
No, we're there twice a week. Okay, oh yeah, so that was my other question, examples of when this maintenance budget is used.
what's that?
Examples of when the maintenance budget is used, is
Oh, the reserve.
569,000 that we're not.
So we have had some things, we really do set that aside for things that aren't budgeted. I mean, I can cite some examples of when we took money out of there. Years ago, right before school opened, we had a major electrical issue with wiring over at High School South. And, we hadn't budgeted for that. It was a few $100,000 to get it fixed, so we ended up taking money out of the maintenance budget for that. We've had some issues with HVAC, that if they're large enough and we can't absorb it in our operating budget, we have taken that out of the maintenance budget as well in order to make the necessary repairs.
Okay.
Things of that nature. I mean, we do budget for regular maintenance, and we do budget for some even specific maintenance projects, but if it's a large thing that we hadn't anticipated, that's what we would utilize a maintenance budget for, or maintenance reserve for.
Okay. And the last thing, I don't know if this is a budget issue, but I was told that elementary schools do not require libraries anymore. Is that a Middletown rule? Is that a state rule? Is that a federal rule? Is that a rumor?
There's no definitive one way or another on that. There is a set of media standards that are coming out, and certainly we believe that books are important where they're housed, and library as a special proper has become more of a lesson special, but that doesn't mean that we don't cover media standards in other ways, and we do have classroom libraries. In our classrooms across the district, especially at the elementary level. So there are some buildings that do have a library proper. There have been some innovative ways to bring libraries to kids. We have a couple of buildings that are doing like mobile libraries, so kids can check out books and have that tangible experience with books. But we have not gotten rid of libraries in the sense of like library is still an important feature, and media studies are still embedded in our curriculum.
Okay. I will just go on the record. So my children are 4, 6, and 8. They're going to be in Middletown schools for a while, so you're going to start to see a lot of me. I think I graduated from Middletown South. I went to school from kindergarten through high school in Middletown. I think our library situation is an embarrassment. I think, there are pictures, even on social media, my kids sitting in the hallway in library time. There's the mobile library, which sounds really exciting, is a cart that someone pushes around. So I really hope that we can prioritize, and reading is so important. What COVID has done to our children and education in general is it's just really challenging, and these kids are going to be dealing with this. I mean, work in a professional setting. I'm seeing it just with entry level, people that were in college during COVID. And I really worry if we don't prioritize reading and library and making it a part of kids' lives, it's going to have a really big impact on them. That's all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jared Paseki, Ashar Drive, Middletown. Quick question for you. In this budget, are all the ESSER and the other grants we received during COVID, have they all expired?
We have a small amount left that is being applied in this budget, but they have been primarily spent down.
Is it on a certain income line that whatever's left?
The grant funds are not included in the operating budget. That is a separate, that's our special revenue fund.
Okay.
So any costs that we are charging off to grants would not be included in the operating budget. They would be charged off in our special revenue fund. And it's separate from here because it doesn't impact the tax levy. Grant funds, you get your revenue and your expenses, and it's not supported by tax levy.
But any specific, because some of those funds were used for what I would consider some important salaries.
Mm-hmm.
So any of those salaries are in the regular budget versus.
Anything that we had that isn't, we're evaluating all of our staffing. So there's a small amount of ESSER funds that remain to offset salaries, but primarily those funds have been spent. So this is what we're in the process of evaluating, which positions, will still be retained, and then what might be the offset for that in the operating budget.
It seems like we just got those grants. I can't believe they've expired.
Well, they go through 24, but a lot of the upfront things have been spent, and primarily the salaries. We're doing a significant HVAC project over at South, and that's with ESSER funds, and that will be happening this summer, and that will expend a lot of those funds. But yeah, that was it was nice to get those funds, but as we've been discussing as a board and as an administrative team, a lot of the things that we put into those grants, and everybody was thinking that they were going to be temporary needs, aren't so temporary. So this is what we're looking to adjust for in our budget.
And also, just to make mention of the grant aspect, you get a lump sum of money, but there are also set-asides that exclude us from, they prevent us from putting those in salary buckets. So the last round of our ESSER funds had a lot of set-aside restrictions placed on them. So you couldn't as freely tag them to certain areas that the first rounds of COVID monies did require. So while that money went very quickly in the beginning with the CARES Act money and then the ESSER 2 money, this latest round of ARP funding, which is the most recent, was really based on a lot of set-asides where you had to put things in specific buckets, extended school day, academic learning loss, mental health, and they told you how much you had to bucket into those set-aside accounts. So it really restricted us in some ways. And while we're still spending down some of those funds, they are funds that can be dedicated to staff salaries.
Yeah, the ARP ESSER really wasn't a salary type program. That most of the salaries we were funding were from the ESSER 2, which was the previous round.
Okay. And I'd just like to reiterate, class size is always a concern. So whatever we can do to manage those would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I need a motion to approve item number 10, tentative budget and related items.
So moved.
Second.
Amy, could you do a roll call?
Do we have discussion?
No discussion. I feel that.
Sorry. You know me. I'm happy that the budget is balanced and we're keeping a lot of things in, but I'm not convinced that we have evaluated all the programs that we have put in with the ESSER funds. I think that they're well needed and that we can't let them go, but I'm not convinced that we're reaching all the students that we need to reach. I want to see these things evaluated, right down to everything. If something needs to be changed, we need to change it. We need to make sure that all these programs are benefiting all kids and not just some. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't gotten into that before budget time, because I do know some kids are being reached, and I know many kids are not being reached, and that's something that always bothers me. I'm going to be straight out honest. I'd like to see some more money cut from the top of administration. I know I saw an administrative chart that we're going to be seeing in the future. I think that our teachers need more hands-on in the classroom to help them deal with all the issues that are going on. I don't think they need more people to supervise them. I think they need more people to get in there and help them and take some of the stuff that COVID has put on their shoulders and let them be able to teach and more help. I think we could sharpen our pencils a little better. I'm not looking to cut the budget under 2%, but I am looking to put money in places that we don't have enough. Capital reserve would be one of them. That's really not a lot of money in there if we have an emergency. And I'm sure we could do this. I can't wait for the personnel meeting, and I would hope that we're going to see the positions that we need put in and the positions that we don't need, which ones are being cut out, what changes are being made. Because for me, I need that information to vote on a budget. I don't want to hear after we vote on a budget that, oh, well, we're cutting this position in a classroom. I don't want to hear it. It happens every year, things we don't know that's in the budget that we should know. So unfortunately, I'm going to go on the record, my personal opinion. I'm voting no for the tentative budget, but I have hope that maybe we're going to dig in our heels before we vote for the regular budget and find some of these savings and make sure that our kids are getting the services that they need and that they're being done the right way. And if we need to make changes because we put these in with ESSER funds, then don't be afraid to make the changes. Just make them work. Make our tax dollars really workable.
Thank you. Anybody else have a discussion, comment, question? All right, Amy, I think we have a motion, so roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti?
Yes.
Mrs. Farley?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mr. Heffernan,
Yes.
Mrs. Miniz,
No.
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
Mrs. Tobacco,
Yes.
Mr. Capone.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, moving on to old business. More old business.
Well, it is old business. Did everybody see the email from Mr. Kirkpatrick in regards to the esports? He is working on it.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just happy to hear
The
that.
locations go to school.
Yes,
and-
he gave the locations. I printed out the email and of course I didn't bring that with me. Sorry, but he's working on it and I hope we have an update at our next board meeting sometime.
I'm sure you will.
Very excited.
Did we hear anything about Laura's photography?
We did do a survey, as I guess you're all aware. We do have the results for the survey, and we have looked at those. It was interesting, we got about a quarter response from each grade level. But based upon the responses that we received back, we have reached out to a few other companies, and we also shared the results with Laura's. We're going to get a few other proposals just to compare with Laura's and also share with Laura's the concerns. There are, we're going to be issuing a request for proposals this week from a couple other companies. There's not a whole lot of them around that can not only do the pictures, but do a district of our size. I mean, there is some other things that they would have to provide that Laura's is already providing, not just the photography for the students, but also photographs for the yearbook. The yearbooks themselves, they do the photography at graduation. They give students pictures at graduation at no cost. So these would be things that we would be looking for other companies to provide as well. But we are looking to have some comparable options so that we can take a look and see how Laura's compares with other companies that would be interested in doing it.
I'm curious to see what the senior class comments were, because they're the ones that it has really affected.
It seems like
to be where the comments
it
come
seems
from.
like the results, and I don't have it in front of me, but I have reviewed the results, and The quality of the pictures those were rated better than the area that most people seem to have the issues with were the packages and the pricing. But I will say that Lourdes hasn't raised their prices in the last several years, so I don't know how they would compare to other companies that are doing the school photos, but there hasn't been price increases over the past several years. So, but I understand, we have all the comments and people would like to have different package options or be able to buy less pictures at less of a price. But again, there's a lot of things that are involved in it that aren't what they're getting revenue for, like I said, the yearbook work and the graduation work and that too. So, but we're taking all that feedback into account, sharing it with boards and looking at some other options.
Maybe that's about 750 responses.
I'm trying to remember how many responses are. I don't know.
25%.
Was that 800? Yeah.
Okay.
Pat's telling me it was about 800. I didn't remember how many there were, but decent amount.
Amy, what we asked you to do was hard. I understand it. I mean, there's not too many photographers out there. But maybe if we go to Lourdes and a little bit, I think the other thing the parents are asking for is the quality of the picture. When a kid's tie in a tree,
Right.
or a girl's hair is out of place, it sounds crazy, but you know what? This is a very important day.
Understood.
I know you're a mother. You understand what I'm saying.
And I have girls.
But, yes. And you know what I'm saying? Maybe if you could be compassionate with Lourdes and say, like,
We are sharing all that feedback with them. We have all the comments and we're sharing it with them and letting them know.
When it comes to their kids, we know parents always pay for their kids, but if you make it appealing to them, the pictures, they'll pay the dollars. So I know you say, but I want them to do something for us with it, not just go in one ear and out the other. There's no reason why they have to lose us as a district. They just have to perform with a little pride.
We are in that process of gathering more information and also sharing what we have, and we'll continue to work that through.
Good. Anything else? Old business?
Something that board members participate in.
What's
So
that?
we overstep it, if we want to participate and make
Are
sure
your
that.
kids still taking pictures?
Well, my kids aren't taking pictures, but I feel for the parents, I really do. It's
I
like,
mean, the board does approve the contract, so I mean, you are the ultimate
I just want to
participator.
ask how you want to participate.
no, I want to.
What's her photo?
I want to talk with the contract, no, I want to talk with Lord. I really am concerned for the kid, I really feel bad, because
We have all,
I wish I
be
had
assured, we
captured
have
audience
all
like that was gonna
800
come to me.
responses, and we are sharing those.
You can give those responses to you and you can document
No,
them.
I don't want responses, I want to go to the.
They know we're evaluating other things.
See if you like it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I mean, the one thing I will clarify is, there were some comments that parents they would like to see BNL do it. BNL doesn't do high school photography,
Okay,
so they're not part of the mix.
BNL also doesn't fix girls' headbands. I can tell you from my daughter's picture. They don't fix girls' headbands. My daughter's picture, it's like right here. She looks adorable, but like it's seven.
well, in second
They all have
grade,
problems.
third grade, that's adorable.
Yeah.
When you're going graduation.
No, I completely get it. I totally get it.
Are we good with Laura?
Okay, Frank, okay.
Moving on. Anyone else for old business? Okay, let's go to new business.
Yes, I do have some. Next Tuesday, the 21st, Navicent Village and Fairview are hosting a Wizards game at Brookdale. If anybody's interested, you could go to wizards.com. It's a good fundraiser. The 3 schools joined together to have this event, so it's always a fun one. And just to remind everybody, the high school plays are this week, coming up, well, next weekend, coming up the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. So get out there and see them. You'll be missing a lot if you don't.
I got my tickets.
I heard they're great. That's all I have for this week. The rest can wait for next week.
Good. I'm just going to say congratulations once again to the high school North hockey team winning the state championship. Amazing. We were here earlier and smiling from ear to ear, and they deserve it so much. So congratulations to them. No one else for new business? Good. Moving on. Public comment. Would anyone like to make a public comment? Please step forward to the microphone. Name and address for the record.
Vera Paseki, Eshar Drive. Just talking about Laura's doing graduation pictures. I was not aware of that last year, so that might be something to educate the parents. And for my son's graduation, although I guess there was Laura's photographer, there was also somebody who was not with Laura's that took pictures, and he happened to be on my son's side as they walk in, and he was selling the pictures online, which I actually bought because I didn't know any better, and lucky me, because then eventually he took the site down, I guess, because people were so angry. But if Laura's is doing graduation pictures, they need somebody on both sides, not just one. So, you know, I don't know what went awry there, but that might be some, I didn't realize, or I would have.
They usually do have somebody on each side, because we sit on the stage and there's a photographer here and a photographer here.
I don't know if they thought this gentleman was part of the district or something.
No, the two Lord's guys are always right in front of us, always.
Well,
Same guys every year.
I don't know, this gentleman was selling
Yeah,
pictures, and then
everyone
the
was.
people that were on the same side as my son that didn't buy it right away.
That was someone
because
who
they-
wasn't really authorized to do that. and
Right.
That's been dealt with.
Yeah, no, I know, because the
You
site
know,
went down, but I'm just
ceremony.
saying, the people that had kids on that side, they missed out. and
But
didn't get
usually,
those
as they
Yeah.
get their diploma in shape, it's right on the stage that the picture's being taken.
Right. But
I think that's something that needs to be fixed at this graduation, because last year it was so fast. I think when they practice, they need to say to the kids, you need to stop, look at the photographer, because it takes them a minute to click it. Sometimes he just gets them zooming by. So if we could address that, that might
There's a lot of
fix
side
your
problems.
situation there, because I know we're always up there, and in the last couple of years, it's just been a zip. You know,
Last year,
need to
we were
stop
concerned,
work.
with the rain, the dark
Yeah.
clouds were coming, I think they were
So,
speeding up a little bit more than normal to get it done.
Great. Thank you, Vera. I now need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Have a good night, everyone.
But